Thank you very much, dear Excellencies, colleagues. I'm firstly joining Director General Iveta Hricová in wishing you all the success for this year, and I'm, of course, looking forward to cooperating with all of you, be those who are representing member states of the European Union and those who are not members. I think we have a lot in common, and therefore I'm signaling to you that although my portfolio remains mainly European Union, I'm ready, and I'd be glad to be in touch with all the countries, that including those which are not members of European Union. Thanks for coming and showing interest for the Slovak presidency and its outcome. First, I'd like to say that we have distributed a short paper where we are summarizing concrete results of our presidency. So I think you can read it, what we believe was the outcome and what we have reached. Therefore, I will focus in my short introductory presentation on what it meant for Slovakia and to what extent we were able to fulfill the priorities that we have drawn in our program that I'm sure you all know. First, a political remark. As Iveta has said, it was for the first time, so it is a huge challenge. It is a challenge to be a president of the Council of European Union for any country, be it small or big. It is a huge challenge. So for us, it was a challenge because it was for the first time. We have not had experience as many older member states who have had it 12 times, like Netherlands and the founding members of European Union. So we have approached the preparation, which lasted, by the way, 4 years, with a great feeling of responsibility for this position of a chair of the council. And secondly, it was also a challenge because I believe you would agree with me that we took over the presidency in unprecedented time for European Union. I dare say we took over in maybe the most difficult and complicated period of time for European Union since it was established in 1957. We took over last year in July when the EU was still facing consequences of a very, very difficult decade in which you will remember the EU was confronted with a series, with the series of crises which started in 2008-9 and continued then later in the Eurozone. Then the aggression of Russia against Ukraine, then the migration, then many terrorist attacks, which unfortunately have cost dozens of lives of innocent citizens in European Union. So this was a very, very difficult decade, and in that particular moment, of course, in that context, we took over. You have to see as well that this difficult situation was multiplied by the vote which took place in the United Kingdom just a few days before Slovakia took over, and that was something which has proven what other countries have been telling us: be prepared for unexpected. So it happened exactly just 2 or 3 days before we took over, because it came as a surprise. The outcome of the vote was a surprise for Slovakia, I dare say for many other countries. So the first unexpected moment for us was to deal really with the situation given by the vote in the United Kingdom, and therefore, in fact, we kicked off with something that we have not planned at all, and that was a decision to organize the Bratislava summit in the mid of September of this year. I will not dwell too long on it. I just say that we believe it was successful because Bratislava Declaration, I think, has clearly, that was the written outcome of Bratislava summit, has clearly demonstrated the commitment of 27 member states to continue with European integration and European project. Although we are really confronted with a situation which does not make us very happy, namely that one of the member states has decided to leave. But the strong commitment which was expressed in Bratislava, the feeling that the heads have pulled together after the Brexit vote was extremely important right at the beginning of our presidency. And second outcome of Bratislava summit was the well-known Bratislava Roadmap, which is a short 2-page document, but still there were specific areas and actions identified. Amongst them, the commitment to ratify as soon as we can the Paris climate agreement, to move forward CETA, the free trade agreement with Canada, and several other issues. So although those who are not dealing with these issues and read that document, it might have looked a bit general, but it was not, because behind each and every item there was a strong commitment to move things ahead in spite of difficult situation given by the Brexit vote. So that was the first big event, and I dare say this was maybe the most important event that took during Slovak presidency, and it was, and that's not our assessment, but many say that it was very successful. Moreover, it has launched what we call Bratislava process, because it has marked the beginning of a reflection on the future of European Union, which, as you know, will be finalized, or we will produce an outcome where we would like to say how we see European Union in the future when we meet in Rome in March to celebrate the 60th anniversary of Rome Treaty. So that was Bratislava. Now, before I very quickly go through the four main baskets that we have in which we have identified our priorities in our program, I'd like to provide you with some figures to illustrate what it meant to be for us to be president of the Council. We have chaired more than 1,200 meetings, working meetings, most of them, or mainly in Brussels. So you can imagine within 6 months, whereas August doors are closed and people are not working, but still we had chaired more than 1,200 meetings. There were 20 ministerial meetings and 200 other meetings on different levels that took place in Bratislava, where 25,000 delegates came to our capital from 45 countries from around the world to attend the events and meetings in Bratislava. We also wanted, and we have used, I believe, presidency for presentation of our country. So therefore we have organized worldwide 250 cultural events with an aim to present the culture of our country. So this was not only a challenge because first time, because difficult context, but because it was a huge challenge in logistical terms, as you see, and as I wanted to demonstrate on with these figures. Now, when it comes to specific areas or topical issues that we have included in our program, maybe I'll start with one remark, just for those of you who are representing countries not being members of European Union. Basically, it is not a presidency of the EU. It's a presidency of one of the institutions, which is the Council, as you know, composed of member states. You have two other key institutions when it comes to legislative process, and that's the Commission, and that's European Parliament. But when you talk about EU presidency and rotating presidency, it's always a presidency chairing the Council. And I'm mentioning that because if you look from outside and you look at the paper that we have distributed to you, it might, look a bit technical and a bit distant from our classical diplomacy that we are all involved in. But presidency of the EU and what EU is doing, mainly and mostly, is a legislative process. So we are adopting legislation by which we are building internal market, by the legislation which is valid in the member states. It's a bit more complicated with the with the legislation, but basically we do legislate. So European Union's main activity is this legislative process, and for the country chairing the Council, this is the main essence of your activity during 6 months. So very quickly, because I want to leave enough time for you for your questions, if there are any. Our first very important block in our program was economy. We called it economically strong Europe. I would just mention the most important outcomes. First, we agreed budget for 2017. That might sound quite so what, a budget? But imagine to have an agreement on 150 billion, because that's roughly the amount which the EU allocates for its annual budget, amongst 28 member states, amongst those who are paying and those who are receiving, and I'm simplifying. So this was a huge challenge, and we are proud that Slovakia has managed to convince the Council first, 28 member states, and then European Parliament, because this is the type of legislation which can only enter into force once you have an agreement of member states and European Parliament. So this was extremely important. Secondly, we have managed to reach an agreement on extension of European Fund for Strategic Investment. That's the famous Juncker plan, more than 300 billion euros that should be allocated and actually should mobilize the investment in the European Union, which is still lagging behind investments in the aftermath of euro crisis. Two, we have started the process of revision of multi-annual financial framework. And also very important, Slovakia has made substantial progress in establishing the European Public Prosecutor's Office. This is very important when EU member states are trying to combat crimes against EU's financial interests. Second basket of our priorities was modern single market. I will highlight just that there were two flagships for us, and that's the energy union and that's the digital single market. In digital single market, I think this is exactly the area which can clearly show to our citizens that what EU is doing is something for them. For example, thanks to Slovak presidency, an agreement that we have reached, the citizens of European Union, when they travel abroad from their home country, so Slovak traveling for holidays in France, and using his mobile phone, both for data and calls and SMSing, he will, at the end of the month, as of July this year, he will not see any extra charges for that. So, when you travel abroad and you make your phone calls or your kids are using on your mobile phones the data services, it can be quite costly. So we call it that the roaming charges will be eliminated. So I'm just illustrating on this very area what kind of concrete results Slovak presidency has achieved. So there's energy, that's the digital union, digital single market, and energy union, where I'd like to highlight Paris Agreement. That was, I think, a very important moment for European Union, which has from the beginning a front runner in trying to achieve a very ambitious global agreement to face and eliminate climate change, that it has allowed us to remain in a front-runner position thanks to an early ratification of this Paris Agreement. Two, we have, after actually 15 years and 3 years of a stalemate in a council, managed to have an agreement on the modernization of EU's trade defense instrument. So basically we want to protect the European internal market against anti-dumping and against dumping and subsidies that in fact threaten internal market and jobs in European Union. Thirdly, migration. Frankly, there were concerns before our presidency because many have had doubts and concerns, and they were curious, how is Slovakia going to deal with this issue, where we have had a very clear position, which has not changed, position basically denying the concept of compulsory relocation of migrants who are coming to European Union. But I think we have dealt with this issue responsibly and accordingly. I mentioned that during our presidency we managed to have an agreement on establishing European Border and Coast Guard. This is basically a capability which should help us collectively assist a country which has a problem to protect and guard its own borders. I have read this morning that there is a process underway that this European Border Coast Guard capability could be deployed in helping two Western Balkan states, even non-member states. Because you've seen that European Union has faced unprecedented challenge and pressure of hundreds, thousands and millions of illegal migrants. And one of the problems was that countries were overburdened and had not enough capabilities or capacities to protect its own borders. So this is key instrument for European Union, this European Border Coast Guard, to keep migration and illegal migration under control. Two, has Slovakia tried to overcome deep political divisions which were caused by adopting a legislation, a concept of compulsory relocation. We have put on table a paper known as Effective Solidarity, which basically should allow all member states to participate and show solidarity in helping others. But this solidarity should not be based solely on principle of mandatory relocation. And fourthly, and I'd like to stop here then with this enumeration of the outcomes. This is the fourth basket called Globally Engaged Europe, where I'd like to mention the dedication of Slovakia to the process of enlargement. I think we have managed to move forward countries which are negotiating membership or are candidate countries or would like to be candidate countries, namely Serbia, Montenegro and Bosnia-Herzegovina, which have either open chapters, or Bosnia-Herzegovina, where we managed to agree for the Council to start with the AVI for their application. Two very important issues: the visa liberalization with Georgia and Ukraine. This is very, very difficult very difficult dossier, but Council has requested that before agreeing on lifting visa with these countries, there has to be in place so-called suspension mechanism, which would allow basically to reintroduce visa if there would be a problem. So, but this was very politically sensitive, but we have managed to move this forward. And two, under this item, globally engaged Europe, I'd like to mention that during our presidency, we have got an agreement on trade agreement with Canada, known as CETA. Dear colleagues, this is not all, of course, but I only, very quickly mentioned some of the concrete results that we could put on table after the 6 months, and they are explained more in detail in the paper that we have distributed to you. I would like to say as well, in concluding my presentation, that challenge for the first time, you remember, challenge because of the context, but context, international and internal. But thirdly, it was a great experience for this country. After 12 years of membership, we have experienced what it means when you, as a member of European Union, are putting aside your own national interests, because in the EU, basically all countries are fighting for individual interests, but what is so precious that we still have in front of us a interest of all. So the commonality is extremely important. But when you are president of the Council, once again, you have to put aside your own narrow national interests and serve as an honest broker. And this was, I dare say, a very worthwhile experience. At the same time, it has given us individually, starting with myself, who has been dealing with this for quite some time, an extraordinary experience and skills, in fact, negotiating skills, because we all were very often put in a situation that you had to deliver impossible vis-à-vis 27 member states who individually have completely diverging interests, but at the end of the day, you as a chair was serving the whole, the EU as a whole, and I think that that this presidency has made Slovakian institutions, Slovakian diplomacy stronger. So this brings me to thanking you all, because I've been in touch with many of you. And I'd like to thank all those who have been in us, who supported us, who have been reporting back home about our country and what we were doing during those 6 months. It was a very good cooperation as well, for which I'm very grateful.